All right, listeners. Well, it's Preston Sandlin with Home Inspection Carolina, and today I wanted to review a video. When you put in home inspection in YouTube, the number one video comes up is this one, the Honest Carpenter, and he talks about home inspection reports. He's generally positive in a couple of the shortcomings. I probably agree with about 92% of what he says. And I thought this video, I would review that video. So without further ado, let's play a little bit of it. And, I'm not going to play the whole 10 minutes of it, but there's a couple of things I wanted to play. So I'm probably about a minute in here. Let's see.
And for this reason, mortgage lenders will often require the buyer to get an inspection report before they buy a house. They want to be.
All right, let me stop right there. That isn't true. It's not the mortgage lender. The mortgage lender requires a termite, usually a termite inspection if they're loaning money on the house. Uh, home Usually mortgage lender doesn't require a home inspection. In fact, most home mortgage people say they don't even want to see the home inspection report. Um, but they do want the termite report, and the reason for this is um, when you buy a house, and you finance it, you can get a mortgage on it. You're required to get insurance for flood, fire, lightning, you know, theft, things that you can't control. But usually, termite damage is not covered under homeowners policy. So that's why the mortgage lender really wants you to get a termite inspection, because they feel like that's something that can be prevented. But not here in Charlotte, North Carolina, is the mortgage person requiring a home inspection report. Nobody's really requiring it. It's just becoming, most realtors are going to recommend it because if they didn't, they would open themselves up to liability. That's kind of where it comes from. But anyway, let's see a little bit more of the Honest Carpenter's. I forget the name of this video. It's the truth about home inspection reports, what they leave out. Let's watch a little bit.
Be sure the buyer knows exactly what they're getting into before they take on the biggest investment of their lives. That's a sound philosophy, and I would never argue against it. But the issue I ran into over the years is that these reports often raise more questions than they answer. And the home inspection industry itself has shifted in ways that have further clouded the waters. So here are a few fundamental truths that I think every home buyer should know. The first is that home inspectors these days are not necessarily construction experts. There was a time not long ago when nearly every home inspector you met had at one point in time worked in the construction field, meaning that they had personally engaged in the building of houses, either as a carpenter or a plumber or just a general laborer. That was the natural progression of things. Work in construction, eventually move on to inspection. But that's not necessarily the case anymore.
Okay, I'll agree with that a little bit. And this guy, I've watched the video. He leans into that heavily that he feels like that home inspectors should have construction experience. Um, I agree that somewhat. I've been doing it now since the late '90s, so probably I'm rolling up on 30 years. And I had some construction experience. Also had pest control and termite work experience, which you learn structures of the house. He does have a point on that. I would say usually they came from some trade, either construction, electrical, or plumbing, or something like that, and they had a knowledge of that. Um, he goes on in this video to talk like that's a weakness if they didn't have that. Yeah, I could see that both ways, but I've also seen some people who have a lot of knowledge about one thing, but don't have a lot of knowledge about another thing, and that can give them blinders. Um, you know, I've seen some great inspectors and terrible inspectors that had construction experience, and I've seen some great inspectors and some terrible inspectors who didn't have construction experience. So I don't, he tends to put that thing on there that, ooh, if they have construction experience, they're great inspectors. And if they don't have construction experience, they're not great inspectors. I mean, he goes on to talk about that a little more in this video, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But anyway, I'm talking, let's review more about the honest carpenters thing here. But again, I probably agree with about 90% of this video.
Inspection has become a massive industry of its own, and many newer inspectors have actually never swung a hammer before. Instead, they've received their entire education through various training companies and accreditation services like the American Society of Home Inspectors. And most everything they know about houses comes from these inspection training programs. So, is this a big deal? Maybe so, maybe not. Many of these institutions are very thorough, and they have very rigorous certification processes that require hours of in-field training. On top of that, about 30 states have some licensing requirements that inspectors have to qualify for every year. And that's all good. But the problem is that still doesn't teach a person much about how houses are actually built. And this confuses many potential home buyers because they mistakenly perceive inspectors as being home construction experts. But these days, there's really no need for an inspector to be a home construction expert because that's not their job. A home inspector actually only has a tiny scope of duties. And none of those duties have anything to do with fixing houses or even understanding the contracting industry. The only responsibility a home inspector has is identifying and documenting visible flaws on a home. That's it. Inspectors are required to be nothing more than a trained set of eyes that will enter a house you're looking to buy, examine the visible surfaces, and document visible problems. They won't peek or peer behind things. They won't take your house apart for research. They won't even suggest what can actually be done about the problems they find. And they won't do these things because they're not really allowed to. Home inspectors are bound in on all sides by liability and legal hazards. And when they're conducting an inspection, they'll almost always err on the side of caution, which can drastically limit your report. For instance, home inspectors will often request that the current homeowner move things away from walls, leave access doors unlocked, and make the house as navigable as possible. They do this because they aren't legally allowed to touch or move those things on their own. And on top of that, they don't want to. They're not furniture movers. Again, that's not their job. They're just supposed to move through a house freely and observe what can be seen mostly from a standing position. They will open electrical panels, sink cabinets, and possibly furnace panels. And to some extent, they'll climb into your crawl space and attic and look around. But this only goes so far. Oftentimes, they won't even force their way into really small enclosures and spaces. And as a result, things will often get missed on your report. Whether it's because visible damage is hidden behind a bunch of junk, or it's concealed in a very hard to reach corner, major things will sometimes fail to show up on an inspection report. I've come into home repair situations immediately after inspectors have passed through and found things that would boggle your mind. Major structural damage, massive wood rot, or even active leak situations. And in many of those cases, I knew that those things had been left off the report because the problem was in a place that the inspector either couldn't physically reach or because clutter prevented them from getting there. Again, it's only their job to go so far. Beyond that, they'll simply put in their report a line that reads, "Could not inspect northeast attic corner due to personal belongings in the way." And they'll leave it at that. This is why you always want to be sure to do two things. If you're having a report pulled on a house, ask your realtor or beg them to make sure that the house is empty, or at least have the current owner get stuff out of the way. Pull furniture away from the walls, and make sure all access doors are open and clear. If these things can't be insured, then consider delaying the inspection until they can be. Otherwise, your report could really suffer as a result. It's already hard enough to see all the corners of a house. Don't make it any harder for your inspector. In addition to this, try to find an inspector with a reputation for thoroughness. Some inspectors are better than others. I know a lot of good ones that will go the extra mile if they can. And even better, they'll often let you come along with them. Most home inspectors aren't opposed to doing the inspection with the client present. Really, if you think about it, this helps them prove that they're covering all their bases. And if for some reason they just cannot get into a spot, at least you'll know which corner of the house didn't get looked at. Maybe later you can then have a tradesperson take a peek back there while they're doing some other work. You want to try to identify as many big issues with the house as possible so that you can prioritize those in a negotiation. And that brings us to the third major point of this video, and probably the most frustrating one. Not everything on a report is equal. The most frustrating thing for many home buyers and sellers is that the inspection report is often full of tiny extraneous flaws. We're talking little drywall cracks, pinhole gaps in caulking, dented walls. Much of a report gets padded with these things. Then whopping huge problems like faulty foundation piers and dangerous wiring might sort of get shoehorned in between. They'll essentially be given the same space as an aesthetic defect, or sometimes less. This is one of my biggest issues with inspection reports. They don't prioritize or distinguish between major flaws and minor flaws. They all just come in as bullet points. One line.
All right. I can see where he's going with this. And you know, if I wasn't a home inspector, I would be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's right. But let me give you a home inspector's point of view on this too. Um, let's say um I have small children versus someone who doesn't have small children. That loose handrail or whatever is my number one priority if I have small children, or the space in between the spindles is a little bit large. Whereas if I don't have children, it's not a big deal to me. Um, where I'm going with this is, you know, everybody's threshold of what's a big deal to them. Now, obviously, some things, you know, I always say, you know, high ticket items, safety issues, those should always be. Always tell people when they're going through their inspection report, yes, he's right. It's going to come in like bullet points because we really can't sort. You know, I mean, I hate to say this to him, but you know, it should be common sense. I mean, you got a freaking foundation issue, and you know, you got a some peel and paint. I mean, I don't mean to sound mean or whatever, but that ought to be common sense. The problem is, you know, if I list prioritize it for you, and you know, I said, hey, that loose handrail because I don't have small children anymore. You know, that was number 7 or 8 on my priority, or number 9, ahead of, I mean, behind some other things. And then a child falls, and you know, they can take me to court and say, well, you said that was the 8th priority on this thing. Yes, I know that what that sounds a little whatever. Here's where I'm going with that. Look at all the things they find on the inspection report. There'll be a summary, and then make like you're doing your laundry. 3 baskets, right? You know how you do your laundry, you divide it up, the whites go here, the colors go here. And I would have must haves, like to haves, be nice to haves. So cosmetic issue would be nice to have. Foundation issue, water damage, roof is shot, furnace is shot, must haves, right? That's my higher priority basket. But it has to be the home buyer's priority, because the home buyer's priorities and the inspector's priorities may be different. And he just said half these guys are tradespeople. Well, think about that. Some little safety issue that's easy to fix would not be a high priority to a home inspector because he would fix it if he was a tradesperson. But to somebody who, you know, is an accountant or something with small children, that's a big issue. So I'm not throwing shade on the guy, maybe a little bit, but you know, the buyer has to make those decisions on what's important to them. But I get that, you know, if they don't have any guidance and they're thinking that this small, you know, straight line crack in the drywall is the same as, you know, a foundation that's, you know, cracking, they're not the same. But anyway, let's go on. Sorry, let me get off my soapbox. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Item after another. And the crazy thing is that one of these line items might carry a $50 price tag, and another might carry a $50,000 price tag. But they'll sit side by side in an inspection report as if they're equals. Again, this is not an inspector's fault. They're still technically doing their job. They're just documenting all the perceived flaws. They're not required to comment on all the implications of a problem, which is why they'll almost always use the blanket phrase in a report, have a qualified contractor inspect and repair. That's often all you'll get from them. In some cases, it may be because they want to stay far away from legal entanglements. And in other cases, it may be just because they simply don't know. They have no idea what would.
Let me add something to that too. Home inspectors can't do the repairs. It's an ethical, and it should be, you know, like, you know, he said earlier, you know, let's say that I was a contractor and I'm an inspector and I find this and that, and I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, I can fix it for you. Here's an estimate. Can you see the conflict of interest here? So you want a third party who's not doing the repairs and not giving a price. um, doing the inspection. And you might say, well, dang, and I mean, there are some inspectors out there who can. We have a thing where you can load it up. It's your choice, and a third party can give you a price. I don't. I mean, sometimes you want to know the prices just to, negotiate or whatever. You need some standing point. But here's what I want to say about that is, you know, let me give you a story. I had a fender bender in my car, right? And my insurance says go get three estimates. My estimate, $800, like $1,600, and $3,500. Same thing. $800, $3,500. So if somebody gives you an estimate and it's, oh, I think it's $800, but I'm not doing the repairs. I just think that's what it is. And then you go into closing and say, hey, I want an $800 credit, or I want $800 for this repair. And then you go to get it repaired, and the person actually doing the repair says, oh, well, that'd be $3,500. Yeah. You can't ask somebody who's not doing the repairs and shouldn't be doing the repairs. If the home inspector's doing the repairs, you got a problem to give you a price on something that they're doing the repair. It can vary widely. And then the other thing is, I've seen situations where there's a certain amount of visible damage, and then once you start digging into it, there's hidden damage. So, it's hard to give a price on something until you get in there and see what the full damage is. But anyway, again, for the most part, I agree with what this guy's saying. I know I'm picking bones and, um, throwing some shade, but I agree with him to a degree, or for the most part.
Go into a repair because they've never repaired a house. They have no idea what it might cost or entail because they've never put together an estimate or had to keep a job on schedule. Whatever the case, they're covered because they're not technically required to talk about any of this stuff anyways. I only get frustrated when I see a report where every tiny drywall crack is documented, but the one seriously major structural flaw in the house gets overlooked. That's unacceptable. And this is why you want to be picky about inspectors. You want someone knowledgeable because you might be able to glean just a little more advice from them. And an inspector with construction experience will always be able to tell you a bit more, even if they have to cut it short somewhere for legal reasons. And if you're wondering where to go to actually find a good inspector, it can be a little tricky. Realtors will often have an inspector to recommend, and you can go that route. But you have to remember that a realtor, in some cases, might also just want the sale to go through. So I think the best thing to do is research inspectors in your area on your own and check websites. What you're looking for is that bio on their about page. What's their work background? Do they have a history in construction? Were they an active contractor at some point? That's what I trust most. Just some construction experience. And I'm not saying that an inspector without construction experience can't do their job well. Again, it's just a observe and report.
Um, Let me stop here. I would say check reviews. That to me is a better indicator of you know, just because somebody's had a driver's license for 20 years doesn't necessarily mean they're a good driver. I mean, I'm not totally throwing shade on him, but yeah, I mean it's a plus if he was a contractor, but I would go by the reviews more. I mean, just because somebody's a contractor doesn't mean that they're a good contractor or they're a good inspector. But the reviews would be hard to, if they got a lot of good reviews over a long period of time, they can't fake that. Or they can't, phone that in. That was earned. So I agree with him. Check websites, but check reviews. Not real crazy about him inferring that the realtor might be in bed with a home inspector. I certainly, from the general public, see that, you know, that could be a thing. But, my experience of all the realtors I know and all the home inspectors that I know, I've never seen anybody. I mean, we're bound by other thing. I mean, that nobody's ever been in bed with anybody that I've ever seen, the competitor or anything. I've never seen that. Most every home inspector tries to do the best job they can. No home inspector wakes up in the morning and go, hey, I'm gonna do a mediocre job today. I mean, they all try to do the best that they can. I know almost all of them from associations and things like that, and they're all pretty good. They try to do the best they can. My advice would be to read reviews to try to get the best inspector you can. Um, And when you get the report, sit down with your realtor, divide it out into must haves, like to haves, be nice to haves, and your, you know, bad, medium, not too bad. I mean, that's, your lighter stuff. And if you're going to get into a negotiation, it depends on the market. I'm getting into realtor territory here. I actually do have a realtor's license, but your must-haves, you really want to hold tight on those. If you're going to give up on something in negotiation, kind of the like to haves or be nice to haves would be the ones I would negotiate. If I had to give up on something to, negotiation. But anyway, this is Preston Sound with Home Inspection Carolina reviewing. What's the name of this video? The Honest Carpenter, the truth about the home inspection report, what they leave out. Home buyers should watch this video. It is the number one video. And hey, man, the guy's got 200 some thousand views, so he's doing something right. But I do agree with most of what he says. Thank y'all for watching. Like, subscribe, check out our website, homeinspectioncarolina.com. There's a whole lot of freebies on there. A lot of we also have Hector the Inspector, which is an AI inspector that only pulls from reputable sources. You can ask them inspection questions, home maintenance questions, all that sort of thing. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, whatever the kids do these days. Thank you.